Hello humans, it is I, Mr. Bell. Hooray, hooray, hooray. We, hopefully, many of us have clay. Yay! Hopefully most of you humans, or at least a good chunk of you humans, got your supply kits that Mr. Vardabedi and I made for you. That includes 10 pounds of clay, one plaster block, and a little bit of wire. And we're going to be using all of those in the next coming weeks and months. But right now we're going to dive right into clay. Hopefully you guys had a chance to kind of make some of the tools that I asked you to do. I want to reintroduce them really quick. Just to kind of remind you, or also secretly I forgot some parts. So I want to introduce the other tools you definitely are going to need for this. First, you got your spoon and you got your fork. This is good for scoring, and the spoon is one of my very favorite clay tools. It's really good for patting things down. It's good for smoothing things down, and it's also really obviously good for scooping things out. You got your credit card. This is an old insurance card that I cut kind of a swoop at the top. This is going to be a really good smoothing tool. It's kind of going to be like a makeshift tool called a rib. And this is also really invaluable for when you put your sculptures on the surface you're making these with. You're gonna wanna, it's gonna stick to it, so you need something to scrape it off. So this is a super valuable tool to have, and I would say it's one of the few that I'm going to show you here that you absolutely need. I would say the spoon is another one that you absolutely need. Sponge. This is a regular old dishwashing sponge. When you're working with these, try to keep them dry as opposed to wet. Sometimes I will dip this into my cup of water that I'm about to show you and drizzle it onto my clay, or kind of use it as a paintbrush. But for the most part, I try to use this to suck up water that I don't want on my clay. So I like to leave those dry. I have this pokey thing. I think it used to be a dart. I'm not sure what it was. But it's really sharp, and it's really good for scoring, and it's really good for kind of doing some really fine detail work on these sculptures. I also have my handy dandy wire. I use this for all kinds of things. I use it sometimes to paint. For some reason, I've had this particular wire for a really long time. So there's my wire. You will also need a cup or a mug, something to put water in that you don't want to drink from probably ever again. This clay is very much non-toxic. It won't hurt you, but it's not something you really want to eat either. Really, general rule, don't eat art supplies. And then never underestimate the power of a sharpened pencil. Using it kind of for the same thing as my dart thing. It's really good for little scores, and maybe making a little bit bigger details than my dart thing. And sometimes I do use a ruler. Sometimes I'll be patting this out. This is really good for a technique we're going to go over later called making slabs, or slab construction clay. And then last but not least, you're going to need some clay. Today, what I want us to be doing is I want us to be playing with the clay. I want you, even if you're an experienced person with ceramics and you're coming from like ceramics class, spend a day playing with this. I want you to really kind of experiment with it. But mostly if you're a person that really hasn't used clay ever before, it's really important to know how to squeeze the clay, how hard you want to squeeze it to get it into that shape that you want. Also, it's really important to know how to regulate the moisture levels in the clay you're working with. This is pretty new clay, so it's pretty moist right now. But it's still going to be a little dry. So the way you can tell is look at it, and if you squeeze it, you see how it starts to crack. What you want it to be doing is kind of wrinkling instead of cracking. So I can tell this needs some more water. The way I'm going to do that is I'm going to make a pinch pot. Remember, bring back to your 4th grade years, just a really rudimentary pinch pot. Basically, you're going to dribble water in this. When you're adding water to clay, especially when you're using relatively small amounts like this, you want to add water pretty slowly. So I'm going to take about 2 fingers, dip it in my cup, and I'm going to kind of drip it onto the inside. Then when I think I've added a good amount of water, you really don't want to start adding much more than what I've added right now all at once. I'm going to fold it in and kind of work the clay just a little bit. You don't want to overwork clay. You want to squish it basically as little as you can, but also you got to squish it quite a lot. So you got to find that balance. The clay that we're playing with today, this will probably be ruined because you're going to work it so much, hopefully. And I'm going to run that test, see if it cracks. It's getting better, but it still needs a little bit of water. Drip a little bit more. My terrible pinch pot. Bam. Get it in there. You don't want it to become too slimy. That's another indicator that I can't really teach you other than to kind of have you play with this and feel what it's like. But you see how now if I like put my finger on it and I take it away, kind of leaves those little, there's little like texture marks that are left. That's a good indicator that this is getting to about the right moisture levels. A little bit more. Give it another little test, see how it's squishing up. Yeah, now it's starting to, it's still going to crack a little, but it's mostly wrinkling, which is good. I'm going to add just a little bit more. And then this should do it. Bam. Okay, so it's kind of slimy to the feel, but not super slimy. And it's pretty workable still. So I have my chunk of clay here. I'm going to show you two different techniques that we're going to be using for these sculptures. When we are actually making these, you can use either of these as much as you want, but you're probably going to end up using one of these. The first one is called coil building. If you were in ceramics class, you probably are familiar with the idea of making coil pottery, but you can use that same technique in sculpture too. Kind of the idea when these sculptures, when we build them, we're going to have them probably be about 4 by 4, maybe 6 inches tall. But they're going to be pretty thick, so we're going to have to make them hollow for firing purposes. We don't want them to blow up, and we don't want them to take them just like for forever to dry in the kiln. So we got to hollow these guys out. And starting with like a base of a coil build is a really good way to kind of cheat your way into doing that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of my clay and I'm going to go back to my first experience with clay, and I'm going to make a snake. Take your hand, kind of rotate it, rock it back and forth, or you can even do kind of this technique to get it started. And then I like to find a flat surface and start actually rolling this out. That kind of reminds me too, another supply that you can't really build is you need a flat surface that you can get dirty kind of on a regular basis. I'm using my workbench here, so I'm going to make this pretty messy. I'm definitely going to clean it up quite thoroughly after this video. Clay dust is not something you really want around your house, and also do yourself a giant favor and try not to use your phones or computers or anything when you are doing that. Keep them kind of far away from it. The silica dust from clay is what it's called. It will be very, very bad for your electronics. It'll wreck a phone. It's wrecked one of mine in the past. It was a sad, sad day. So I want to work with probably about this thick for this guy. When we're making our bigger sculptures, we might want to go a little thicker. But I'm going to illustrate just how you can build it up. Maybe you want to think about making my gargoyle's head. So I'm going to make him maybe about that big. So you just take these coils and you layer them on top of each other. And then as you're building, dip your finger in your water. You can start smoothing these together. I'll probably build a lot more next time I do it, but I'm just kind of starting this connection, so I want to start with it small. Remember to keep dipping your fingers in your water too. So smoothing that out. On the inside, I don't care so much. It doesn't have to be perfectly smooth. And on the outside right now, it doesn't matter either. And then I'm going to build more. I think I'm going to make this all into one big old snake. Rolling it out. Again, rocking my hand, kind of bending my fingers like that, and then rocking motion is the best way to do this. Smooth her out, smooth her out. This is, again, we're just experimenting, so this isn't going to be judged on what it looks like. Remember, this is going to be a turn-inable mini assignment that I'm going to have due tomorrow. or not tomorrow, Thursday. I'll give you Wednesday to finish this. But it's going to be a hard due date on Thursday. I think that I want to work with maybe a little thinner. I think I'm going to just stretch this up, and I'll show you how to do that. So when my coil ended, I just started again right there. And then I'm going to just kind of wrap it around. But now, instead of making this into just like a flat column up, I'm thinking about making maybe the shape of my gargoyle's head, which is going to be kind of a apple shaped almost. So I'm going to lay this on the edge of it and kind of have it stick out like that. And then I'm going to roll it up like so. You know what? As I think about that, having this be a real assignment, that's silly. I'm not going to do that because really you're probably going to wreck this clay. So if you want to skip out on it, I can't stop you. But man, playing with some clay is fun. You should do this. Don't make art for your grade. Make art for art's sake. So I think you get the point of how you can start building this up. And we're going to go into this in a lot more detail on how to kind of fine do this. But for now, what I want you to be doing is making some coils, playing around with it, and seeing how hard it is to like smooth this out, how much you want to pinch when you do this to build it out. It's just kind of, it takes a little bit of knowledge to kind of understand how to manipulate clay. And again, really the only way you can do that is by playing around with it and experiencing it for yourself. I'm going to put my credit card thing to good use now. Notice that this is kind of stuck to my mat. If I peel it off quickly, I'm just going to wreck it. But I can scrape it off and voila, comes off like nothing. But I want to keep that. The other kind of building that we're going to do, I'm just kind of going to illustrate this for you, and you might want to run some experiments yourself because this is actually surprisingly difficult to do, and why I kind of really will end up recommending building these guys initially with like thick coils because it kind of gets rid of a big chunk of this part. But this is, so say this lump, imagine this is my gargoyle, and I'm all done with them, but now I have to go into him and I have to start digging out this middle part, which can be a giant pain in the butt. But I probably will use this on parts of my sculpture. As I build it out, I might start with like a real basic form of a coil pot, and then I'm going to start building it out with this. And there might be some parts that I need to make hollow. But as you can see, it's a giant pain in the butt. I do use spoons sometimes to kind of do this. But again, giant pain in the butt to actually do this and not wreck your sculpture. So that's why that coil pot is really good. But again, I will use this technique probably for parts of it, and I hope that you guys probably will find a part of your sculpture that you want to do that with too. So for now, really seriously, spend some time playing with this clay. It's fun. When you are done with this clay, feel it if it feels kind of really hard to manipulate. This clay's getting there because I've worked it so much. You know, you might want to just chuck it if you're using a really small amount of clay. But if your clay still feels okay, this, it's kind of getting to that point where it might not be great anymore. But I definitely don't think it's worthy of throwing away yet. I am going to add it to my clay. Okay, this is another super important part of this class. You know, pretend you are in home ec class and this is your robot baby that they give you. And they say, if your robot baby dies, you fail the class. I'm not going to be that hardcore, but man, if you wreck this clay, it's going to make your life miserable as far as this class is concerned. So really be pragmatic. Never leave this open, ever. I'm going to take this guy, and I'm going to not just throw it in there like a lump. I'm actually going to kind of, not like mix it with the clay that's brand new and fresh, but I'm going to kind of squeeze it into it a little bit. I'm going to give it a real gentle push. And that way it'll eliminate a little bit of the air around it, because when you close up your bag, so I cut this clay from right here. So I don't want to just bag it up and leave that area without air in it. I really want to take my hands and squeeze out as much air as I can from this bag. You know what? I'm actually going to add just a little bit of water to it, just to have that water kind of trapped in that environment. Not too much. This clay is pretty new, but this is a good thing to do. Now I'm going to take my hands and I'm going to literally squeeze out as much of the air from it as I possibly can. And then I'm going to take my bag, give it a pinch, give it a good twist. If you want to twisty tie this shut, you can. The way I usually like storing clay is I'll just kind of make it a tail, and then I'll use gravity to help me store my clay.